Dr. Evelyn Hayes had been warned that her new assignment aboard the Galactic Harmony would be challenging. What nobody had mentioned was that challenging apparently meant babysitting the galaxy's most dangerous predators while they threw the interstellar equivalent of a tantrum. The cubs, 6 juvenile Vrakken, each roughly the size of a small horse and covered in scales that could deflect plasma fire, had been refusing to eat for 3 days. This was, according to the frantic communications from the Vrakken Empire, a diplomatic crisis of the highest order. "They're starving themselves," Ambassador Thexelar explained, his reptilian features twisted with anxiety. "The cubs were gifts to demonstrate our commitment to peaceful relations. If they die under council care..." "War," completed Commander Zixtal, the station's military liaison. "The Vrakken will consider it an act of aggression." Dr. Hayes looked through the observation window at the cubs, who were sprawled dramatically across their habitat like furry-scaled teenagers having an existential crisis. "Have you tried different food?" 17 varieties of protein, including delicacies from their homeworld, Thexler said. "They refuse everything." "What about environmental factors? Temperature, humidity, lighting?" "All adjusted to perfect specifications." "Medical examination?" "Complete." "They're physically healthy but psychologically distressed." Dr. Hayes rubbed her temples. She was a xenobiologist, not a therapist. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "You're the human," Zixtal said, as if this explained everything. "Humans have unusual success with juvenile specimens." "I'm sorry, what?" Thexelar pulled up a holographic display showing statistics. 47 incidents across council space. Every time a human has been present during juvenile care situations, success rates increase by 300%. "That's..." Dr. Hayes stared at the numbers. "That's statistically impossible. Yet consistently reproducible," Zixtal added. "We need you to interact with the cubs." "Interact how?" "We don't know. Just be human at them." Dr. Hayes blinked. "Be human at them." "Yes. That's not a methodology. It's all we have." She looked at the cubs again. One had noticed her at the window and was watching her with large, intelligent eyes. The others were still engaged in their dramatic hunger strike, but she could see their ears twitching in her direction. "Fine," she said, because arguing with alien bureaucrats was somehow more exhausting than dealing with potentially lethal predator cubs. "But if I get eaten, I'm haunting both of your species." The habitat was larger than her apartment back on Earth, designed to accommodate the cubs' eventual adult size. Currently, it looked like a very expensive daycare center for creatures that could theoretically kill her without breaking a sweat. The cubs watched her enter with varying degrees of interest. The one from the window, she decided to call him Curious, approached cautiously. The others maintained their positions of dramatic suffering. "Hey there," Dr. Hayes said, settling cross-legged on the floor. "I hear you guys are on a hunger strike." Curious tilted his head, processing her words through the universal translator. "Look, I get it. New place, weird food, everyone staring at you through windows. It's rough." She pulled out her lunch, a sandwich she'd grabbed from the human section of the mess hall. "Mind if I eat? I'm starving." She unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. The cubs watched with fascination. "It's just turkey and cheese," she explained between bites. "Nothing fancy. Humans aren't really known for our sophisticated cuisine." One of the other cubs, a smaller one she mentally dubbed Shy, crept closer. Dr. Hayes continued eating, pretending not to notice. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said conversationally. "Everyone thinks this is some kind of human superpower. Like we have special magic for dealing with young animals. But honestly, I just treat you like people. Because that's what you are, right? Just people who happen to be covered in scales and capable of biting through steel." Curious made a sound, not quite a purr, not quite a chirp. He settled down next to her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his scales. "There we go," she said softly. "Much better than sulking in the corner." That's when the rest of them moved. Not aggressively, just a gradual migration toward her position. Within minutes, she was surrounded by 6 massive predator cubs, all watching her eat her sandwich with rapt attention. "You guys want some?" she asked, tearing off a piece of turkey. Curious sniffed it delicately, then accepted it with surprising gentleness. The others perked up immediately. "Oh, now you're interested in food," she said dryly. Typical. But as she shared her lunch with the cubs, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. Through the observation window, she could see a crowd gathering. Not just the ambassador and commander, but dozens of beings from various species, all watching with expressions of awe, terror, and something that looked suspiciously like worship. Her comm unit buzzed. "Dr. Hayes," came Thexlar's voice, tight with what sounded like barely controlled panic. "Please don't move. We're calling an emergency session of the council." "Why?" she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "The cubs have just demonstrated pack-bonding behavior with a human. This has implications." Dr. Hayes looked down at Curious, who had curled up against her side like a massive, scaly cat. "What kind of implications?" "The kind that might accidentally start a galactic revolution." The council emergency session was held in the station's largest conference room, which still somehow felt cramped with representatives from 47 different species crammed inside. Dr. Hayes sat at the center of it all, feeling like a bug under a microscope, while the cubs remained pressed against her sides like furry, scaled bodyguards. "The situation," announced High Counselor Veltar, a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet, "is unprecedented." "Unprecedented is putting it mildly," muttered Ambassador Thexlar. "The cubs have refused to leave the human side for 6 hours. They won't even eat unless she's present." "Which brings us to the real problem," Commander Zixtal added, his military bearing somehow making the situation sound even more dire. "According to Vrakken law, when cubs demonstrate pack-bonding behavior, the bonded individual becomes their legal guardian." Dr. Hayes nearly choked on her water. "I'm sorry, what?" "Congratulations," said the Vrakken representative, a massive female whose scales gleamed like polished armor. "You are now the adoptive parent of 6 juvenile apex predators." "I didn't adopt anything. I just shared my sandwich." "Irrelevant. The bond has been formed. You are now responsible for their care, training, and cultural education until they reach maturity." "How long is that?" "Approximately 15 Earth years." Dr. Hayes stared at the cubs, who looked back at her with what she was beginning to recognize as smug satisfaction. "This is insane." "It gets worse," High Counselor Veltar announced, which was exactly what she didn't want to hear. "We've been analyzing similar incidents across council space. The pattern is disturbing." A holographic display materialized, showing dozens of cases: humans bonding with juvenile Krex warriors, humans accidentally becoming pack leaders to Thelonian hunting groups, humans somehow convincing adolescent Zexian hive minds to abandon their collective consciousness in favor of individual friendship. "Every time," Veltar continued, "the juveniles choose the humans over their own species. They abandon traditional behaviors, adopt human social patterns, and demonstrate unprecedented levels of cross-species cooperation." "That sounds like a good thing," Dr. Hayes said weakly. "It's cultural genocide," hissed the Krex representative. "Humans are systematically dismantling our traditional child-rearing practices. We're not doing it on purpose. Intent is irrelevant. The effect remains." Dr. Evelyn looked around the room at the sea of alien faces, all staring at her with varying degrees of suspicion, fear, and fascination. "So, what exactly are you accusing humans of?" "Weaponized parenting," announced the military strategist, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like breaking glass. "Your species has developed the ability to subvert juvenile behavioral patterns as a form of soft conquest." "We like kids. That's not conquest. That's just being decent people." "Your decency is reshaping galactic civilization," Veltar said. "Species that have maintained strict hierarchical structures for millennia are seeing their young abandon tradition in favor of human social models." The cubs, apparently bored with the political discussion, had started playing with each other around Dr. Hayes's chair. Their play was gentle, cooperative, and utterly unlike the aggressive dominance displays typical of their species. "See," the Vrakken representative pointed at them. "They should be establishing pack hierarchy through combat. Instead, they're sharing." "The horror," Dr. Hayes said dryly. "You joke, but this is serious," Commander Zixtal interjected. "If this pattern continues, entire species could lose their cultural identity within a generation." "Or," Dr. Hayes suggested, "maybe your cultural identities could use some updating?" The silence that followed was profound and deeply uncomfortable. "Did she just," the Krex representative began, "suggest that our ancient traditions are flawed?" finished the Thelonian observer. "I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, if your kids prefer human social models, it's because human social models are actually better for kids." The room erupted. Accusations flew in 17 different languages. Several representatives stood up, scales bristling, tentacles waving, energy fields crackling with indignation. Through it all, the cubs remained calm, occasionally looking up at Dr. Hayes as if to check that she was still there, then going back to their peaceful play. "Silence!" High Counselor Veltar's voice cut through the chaos. "There is another matter we must address." The room quieted, though the tension remained thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. "The economic implications," Veltar continued. "If humans can reliably bond with juvenile members of any species, they become invaluable as caregivers, educators, and cultural mediators. The demand for human services could destabilize the galactic economy." "Oh, come on," Dr. Hayes said. "It's not like we're doing anything special. We just treat them like individuals instead of statistics." "Exactly," said the economic advisor, a slug-like being whose slime trail glowed with anxiety. "Your species has weaponized empathy. Do you understand what that means for established power structures?" Dr. Hayes looked down at Curious, who had fallen asleep with his head in her lap. "It means kids get treated better?" "It means," Commander Zixtal said grimly, "that every species in the galaxy is going to want human caregivers for their young, and when the young grow up preferring human social models to their own cultural traditions." "Cultural revolution," finished Ambassador Thexler. "Species-wide social restructuring, the end of civilization as we know it." "Or the beginning of a better one," Dr. Hayes suggested. The silence returned, heavier this time. "There's something else," High Counselor Veltar said finally. "Something we discovered while researching these incidents." Dr. Hayes really didn't want to know what else could possibly make this situation worse, but she asked anyway. "What?" "It's not just juveniles. Adult specimens are also beginning to show preference for human social interaction. We have reports of entire colonies requesting human administrators, military units requesting human commanders, and research teams refusing to work without human liaisons." "That's..." Dr. Hayes tried to process this information. "That's not possible. It's happening, right now, across 17 sectors." She looked around the room at the assembled representatives, seeing them with new understanding. They weren't just concerned about cultural preservation or economic disruption. They were terrified. "You think we're taking over," she said slowly. "Aren't you?" asked the Krex representative. "Not intentionally. The most effective conquest is the one the conquered welcome," Commander Zixtal observed. "And everyone seems to welcome human influence." Dr. Hayes felt the weight of 6 sleeping cubs against her legs, the warmth of their trust, the simple contentment of creatures who had found exactly what they needed. Around her, representatives of dozens of species watched with expressions ranging from awe to terror. "So what happens now?" she asked. High Counselor Veltar's form shimmered with what might have been resignation. "Now we try to figure out how to manage a galaxy-wide social revolution that started with a turkey sandwich." 3 weeks later, Dr. Hayes had learned several important things about her new life. First, feeding 6 Vrakken cubs required roughly the same logistical planning as a military operation. Second, her pack had grown to include 12 other juveniles from 7 different species, all of whom had mysteriously appeared in her care after various incidents across the station. Third, the galactic media had decided she was either the most dangerous human alive or the most important, and they couldn't agree which was worse. The human phenomenon, read the headline of the Galactic Tribune. Cultural terrorist or evolutionary catalyst? I prefer accidental babysitter, Dr. Hayes told the cubs as she prepared their morning meal. The mess hall had been redesigned 3 times to accommodate her expanding menagerie, and the staff had stopped looking surprised when she arrived with her entourage of deadly juveniles trailing behind her like oversized puppies. The cubs had learned to take turns, share resources, and resolve conflicts through discussion rather than violence. This was apparently so shocking that xenobiologists from across the galaxy had started making pilgrimages to observe them. Dr. Hayes, came a familiar voice from the mess hall entrance. Commander Zixtal approached with his usual expression of barely controlled panic. We have a situation. Let me guess, she said, not looking up from portioning out protein cubes. Another species wants to send their juveniles for cultural exchange? Worse. The Dominion of Keth has issued a formal challenge. That got her attention. The Dominion was known for 2 things: their military prowess and their complete inability to understand humor. What kind of challenge? They claim that human influence is weakening the galaxy's defensive capabilities by making species soft. They want to prove that traditional child-rearing methods produce superior warriors. Dr. Hayes looked at her cubs, who were currently engaged in a complex negotiation over who got the last protein cube. The negotiation involved careful consideration of who had eaten what yesterday, who had helped with cleaning duties, and who had shared their favorite sleeping spot. It was more sophisticated than most diplomatic treaties. And how exactly do they plan to prove this? Combat trials. Their juveniles against yours. My what now? Your cubs. The Dominion wants to pit their traditionally raised warriors against human-influenced juveniles in a series of tests. Dr. Hayes set down the protein dispenser. They want children to fight each other. Juvenile combat trials are a standard practice among warrior species. It's how they establish hierarchy and demonstrate strength. It's child abuse. It's tradition. Same thing in this case. Commander Zixtal's expression suggested he might actually agree with her, but his military training prevented him from saying so. The challenge has been formally issued. According to galactic law, it cannot be refused. Watch me. Dr. Hayes, if you refuse, the Dominion will claim that human methods produce cowards. They'll use it as justification to ban human caregivers from their territory. Good. I don't want to work with people who think child fighting is entertainment. It's not just the Dominion. 7 other warrior species are watching this. If they decide human influence is detrimental to military readiness, they'll ban humans from working with their children too? They'll ban humans from their space entirely, and they'll pressure other species to do the same. Dr. Hayes looked at her cubs again. Curious had noticed her distress and was making concerned, chittering sounds. The others were gathering around, their play forgotten in favor of offering comfort to their human. This was the problem with caring about someone. It made you vulnerable to people who wanted to hurt them. Fine, she said finally. But I have conditions. You can't modify a formal challenge. I'm not modifying it. I'm accepting it with terms. The trials will be public, observed by neutral parties, and focused on practical skills rather than pure combat. The Dominion won't agree to that. Then they can explain to the galaxy why they're afraid of fair competition. Commander Zixtal actually smiled at that. You're learning galactic politics. I'm learning that bullies are the same, everywhere. The announcement of the trial sent shockwaves through council space. Betting pools opened on 17 different worlds. Military academies began analyzing human child-rearing methods for potential strategic applications. The cubs themselves remained blissfully unaware of the political implications, more concerned with the fact that their daily routine now included practice time with Dr. Hayes. Okay, everyone, she said, addressing her mixed group of juveniles in the station's main gymnasium. I know this is confusing, but some people think that because you're happy and cooperative, you can't also be strong and capable. A young Krex, barely 3 feet tall but already showing the distinctive ridge patterns of his species, raised a clawed hand. But we are strong and capable. I know that. You know that. But we need to show everyone else. Why? Asked one of the Thelonian cubs, her fur bristling with indignation. We don't need to prove anything to anyone. Because if we don't, they'll try to separate us. They'll say that human influence is bad for you, and they'll take you away from me. The silence that followed was profound. The cubs exchanged glances, communicating in the complex mix of body language and vocalizations they'd developed together. That won't happen, Curious said finally, his voice carrying the absolute certainty that only children could manage. We won't let it. It's not up to you, sweetie. It's up to the adults. Then we'll show the adults, said the Crex cub, his young voice carrying an edge of steel that reminded everyone present that he belonged to a warrior species. We'll show them what human-raised cubs can do. The trials were scheduled for the following week. Dr. Hayes spent the time trying not to think about what would happen if her cubs lost. The political ramifications were bad enough, but the personal cost would be devastating. These weren't just her charges anymore. They were her family. You're worried, observed Dr. Martinez, the station's chief psychologist, as they watched the cubs practice their coordination exercises. Terrified, Dr. Hayes corrected. These are children, and I'm putting them in a situation where they have to fight to stay with me. They're not fighting to stay with you. They're fighting to prove that your way works. Same thing. Is it? Look at them. Dr. Hayes watched her cubs working together, teaching each other, supporting each other, celebrating each other's successes. They moved with confidence, communicated with respect, and approached challenges with creativity rather than brute force. They're not just stronger because of your influence, Dr. Martinez continued. They're better, and they know it. What if it's not enough? Then you'll have proven that the galaxy isn't ready for better. But I don't think that's going to happen. The day before the trials, High Counselor Veltar requested a private meeting. Dr. Hayes found him in his office, his jellyfish-like form pulsing with agitation. I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's events, he said without preamble. Let me guess. You want me to throw the trials to avoid political complications. On the contrary, I want you to win. That wasn't what she'd expected. Why? Because I've been watching the data from human-influenced populations. Crime rates down 40%. Innovation up 60%. Interspecies cooperation at historical highs. Whatever you're doing, it works. We're just treating them like people. Exactly. And that's revolutionary. Veltar's form shifted, colors deepening. The warrior species see this as a threat to their power structures. They're not wrong, but maybe it's time those power structures changed. And if my cubs lose, then we'll have proof that kindness makes you weak, and the galaxy will continue as it always has. Divided, suspicious, and constantly on the edge of war. No pressure or anything. Dr. Hayes, you've accidentally started a social revolution. Tomorrow we find out if evolution or tradition wins. Dr. Hayes left the meeting with a clearer understanding of what was at stake. It wasn't just about her cubs anymore. It was about the future of galactic civilization. That night, as she settled down for sleep surrounded by her pack of adopted juveniles, she allowed herself one moment of doubt. What if kindness really wasn't enough? The arena was packed. Representatives from every major species filled the viewing stands, while news crews broadcast the event across the galaxy. Dr. Hayes had never felt smaller or more exposed as she stood at the edge of the competition floor with her cubs arranged around her. Across the arena, the Dominion's juveniles waited in perfect formation. 12 young warriors, each trained from birth in combat techniques, disciplined to absolute obedience, and conditioned to see victory as the only acceptable outcome. They looked like miniature killing machines. Her cubs looked like children. This is ridiculous, she muttered to Commander Zixtal, who had been assigned as her official observer. The entire galaxy is watching, he replied. No pressure. I hate you all. The trials were designed to test practical skills rather than pure combat, as Dr. Hayes had insisted. Navigation challenges, resource management scenarios, team coordination exercises, and problem-solving tests. The Dominion had agreed, confident that their superior discipline would triumph regardless of format. Contestants will be evaluated on efficiency, innovation, and adaptability, announced the trial coordinator, a neutral observer from the Judicial Council. Each team will face identical challenges. Performance will be measured objectively. Dr. Hayes knelt down to address her cubs one final time. Remember, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about showing everyone who you really are. We know, Curious said, his voice steady despite his youth. We're ready. The first challenge was navigation through a complex maze while carrying essential supplies. The Dominion cubs attacked it with military precision, moving in formation, following predetermined roles, executing their plan flawlessly. Dr. Hayes's cubs approached it like a group project. They spent the first few minutes discussing strategy, with each cub contributing ideas based on their species' natural abilities. The Krex cub took point because of his superior night vision. The Thelonians handled the heavy lifting with their natural strength. The Vrakken cubs used their climbing abilities to scout ahead. They're wasting time, observed the Dominion commander, a scarred veteran whose disapproval radiated from every scale. They're planning, Dr. Hayes corrected. When her cubs finally moved, they moved as a unified team. They adapted their strategy on the fly when they encountered unexpected obstacles. They helped each other over difficult terrain. They shared resources based on need rather than hierarchy. They finished the maze 3 minutes faster than the Dominion cubs. Luck, the Dominion commander declared. The second challenge was resource allocation during a simulated crisis. Each team was given limited supplies and tasked with sustaining themselves while completing various objectives. The Dominion cubs followed strict rationing protocols, with resources distributed according to rank and perceived importance. It was efficient, logical, and completely inflexible when circumstances changed. Dr. Hayes's cubs approached it like a family deciding what to have for dinner. They negotiated, they compromised, they shared based on need and preference. When the simulation threw them unexpected problems, they adapted their resource distribution in real time, making decisions collectively rather than waiting for orders from a leader. They not only completed all objectives, but finished with surplus resources, which they used to help simulated civilian populations that the Dominion cubs had ignored entirely. Impressive, admitted the trial coordinator. But the final challenge will determine the outcome. The final challenge was the most complex, a multi-stage problem that required teams to navigate social conflicts, technical problems, and resource management simultaneously. It was designed to test everything the previous challenges had measured, but under pressure and with competing priorities. The Dominion cubs approached it like a military operation. Clear chain of command, defined roles, precise execution. They were disciplined, focused, and utterly predictable. Dr. Hayes's cubs approached it like life. They argued. They disagreed. They got frustrated with each other. But they also listened, adapted, and found creative solutions that the rigid Dominion structure couldn't match. When one cub struggled, others stepped in to help. When conflicts arose, they resolved them through discussion rather than dominance. It was messy, chaotic, and completely unlike anything the observers had ever seen in a formal trial. It was also remarkably effective. The results, announced the trial coordinator after what felt like an eternity of deliberation, are as follows. The arena fell silent. In individual performance metrics, both teams showed exceptional capabilities. However, in overall effectiveness, adaptability, and innovative problem-solving, the human influence team demonstrated superior results. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of Dr. Hayes's heart pounding in her ears. Furthermore, the coordinator continued, the human influence team showed remarkable concern for civilian welfare, resource conservation, and long-term sustainability. These factors, while not traditionally valued in warrior training, represent significant strategic advantages in real-world scenarios. The Dominion commander's expression could have melted steel. This proves nothing. Combat effectiveness cannot be measured by civilian concerns. Actually, interrupted a new voice, it can. Everyone turned to see Admiral Keithvar, the Dominion's own military leader, approaching the arena floor. His presence sent ripples of shock through the crowd. "Admiral?" The Dominion commander looked confused. "Sir, I don't understand." "I've been reviewing the data from human-influenced populations," Keithvar said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "Military units with human advisors show 20% fewer casualties, 30% higher mission success rates, and significantly better long-term strategic outcomes." He paused, looking at Dr. Hayes's cubs, who were clustered around her in a protective formation that somehow managed to look both defensive and welcoming. "Warriors who fight only for victory are valuable," he continued. "Warriors who fight for something worth protecting are invaluable. These cubs understand the difference." The Dominion commander's protests were drowned out by the eruption of discussion from the viewing stands. Representatives were arguing, debating, and frantically taking notes. "The trial is concluded," the coordinator announced. "The human method has been validated." Dr. Hayes felt her knees go weak with relief. Her cubs pressed closer, purring and chittering with satisfaction. "So what happens now?" she asked Commander Zixtal. "Now," he said with something that might have been a smile, "you become the most in-demand childcare specialist in the galaxy." 3 months later, Dr. Hayes sat in her new office aboard the flagship of the Galactic Educational Initiative, reviewing applications from 17 different species who wanted human caregivers for their young. Her original cubs were now senior assistants, helping to train new human-alien teams and serving as living proof that cooperation was more powerful than competition. The revolution had been quiet but thorough. Species that had maintained rigid hierarchies for millennia were experimenting with more flexible social structures. Military academies were incorporating human emotional intelligence training into their curricula. Even the Dominion had quietly requested human advisors for their youth development programs. "Dr. Hayes," came a familiar voice from her doorway. High Counselor Veltar floated into her office, his form pulsing with what she'd learned to recognize as amusement. "Counselor, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For accidentally solving the galaxy's oldest problem, which was how to raise children who are strong enough to protect what they love and wise enough to know what's worth protecting." Dr. Hayes looked out her viewport at the stars, thinking about all the young beings across the galaxy who were learning that strength and kindness weren't opposites, that cooperation was more powerful than domination, and that the best way to win was to make sure everyone could win together. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said finally. "What?" "We didn't solve anything. We just stopped pretending that being decent to each other was complicated." Veltar's form shimmered with what might have been laughter. "Revolutionary." Apparently. As if summoned by their conversation, Curious appeared in the doorway, now nearly adult-sized but still approaching her with the same trusting confidence he'd shown as a cub. "Dr. Hayes, the new arrivals are here. 6 Zexian juveniles and their parents. They're asking if you have time for introductions." She stood up, straightening her jacket. "Another day, another species discovering that maybe, just maybe, there was a better way to raise their young." "Tell them I'll be right there," she said. "And Curious, make sure the mess hall has enough chairs. Something tells me we're going to need them." As she walked toward what would undoubtedly be another impossible situation that would somehow work out perfectly, Dr. Hayes reflected on the absurdity of her life. She'd come to space to study alien biology and had ended up revolutionizing galactic civilization by treating children like people. The galaxy, it turned out, was a lot like the cubs she cared for. It just needed someone to sit with it during lunch and remind it that cooperation was more fun than conflict, even if it did require a lot more chairs.